Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into early Islamic history again today. We're going to be looking at two figures that you might not know that well. Uthman ibn Mathoon and his wife, Khawla bint Hakeem. You gave us some great biographical material about them. So we're going to try to uncover some really interesting stuff about their lives and what they meant for the early Muslim community.
Yeah, when you look at Uthman and Khawla, what's really striking is that they were among the very first to become Muslim. Like, we're talking maybe even in the first 20.
Wow.
Can you imagine the courage that must have taken in the heart of Mecca, when opposition to the Prophet's message was so strong?
Right. It really makes you think, what drew them to Islam so early on? Especially when you consider their social position. I mean, they were Qurayshi,
Right.
but they belonged to these smaller, less influential tribes.
Right.
So they were more exposed to the kind of backlash against the Muslims.
Absolutely. And their conversion so early on really highlights something fascinating about the early Muslim community. It wasn't just like the powerful figures like Abu Bakr or Umar. It was people from all walks of life finding something powerful in the Prophet's message.
Mm.
And Uthman in particular, even before Islam, seems to have been an interesting guy.
Yeah.
For example, he chose not to drink alcohol,
Mm.
which was pretty unusual for the time.
Yeah, definitely.
He viewed it as something that really clouded your judgment and opened you up to ridicule, especially for people he considered, well, foolish.
So it shows a kind of real awareness
Right.
of how he's presenting himself and the people around him.
Yeah, suggests a really strong moral compass and a discerning mind, and it really foreshadows the piety that he'll become known for as a Muslim. In fact, he was so dedicated to his faith that he actually led the very first migration to Abyssinia,
Oh, wow.
before even the more famous migration that was led by Jafar ibn Abi Talib.
Okay. So really, really early on, they were trailblazers, trying to find some refuge from the persecution
Yeah.
and establish a presence for Islam beyond Arabia.
Yeah.
Did they face any pushback in Abyssinia?
Well, this is where Uthman's story takes a kind of an unexpected turn.
Oh,
He had this complex relationship with Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira,
okay.
the infamous Meccan leader,
Mhm.
persecutor of the Muslims. But for some reason, Al-Walid really had affection for Uthman and offered him protection in Mecca even after he became Muslim.
Wow, that's surprising,
It is.
given Al-Walid's, track record.
Exactly.
So what did Uthman do?
He refused.
Oh, wow.
He felt it was wrong to accept any kind of special treatment while other Muslims were suffering, especially those who didn't have powerful families. He wanted to face the hardship alongside the most vulnerable.
Wow. I mean, his refusal really says a lot about the values that were taking root in the early Muslim community, this sense of shared hardship, of standing together, in the face of adversity,
Yeah,
regardless of your social status.
absolutely. It also shows Uthman's character, unwavering commitment to justice, and his empathy for the less fortunate. But his story isn't the only one that challenges our understanding of early Islam. His wife, Khawla bint Hakeem, she also played a pretty remarkable role, and it's one that's often overlooked.
Before we get into that, can you clear up something for our listeners?
Sure.
Khawla bin Hakeem isn't the same Khawla as the one who's mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Mujadila, right?
That's right. That's Khawla bin Thalaba, a completely different person. It's an easy mix-up to make, but important to keep them separate.
Okay, good to know. So let's talk about Khawla bin Hakeem. What makes her so important in early Islam?
Well, she was known for her intelligence
Hmm.
and her ability to connect with people, but I think maybe her most impactful contribution was her role as a matchmaker, especially for the Prophet himself after Khadijah passed away.
Yeah, she's credited with suggesting both Sauda bin Zama and Aisha bin Abu Bakr as potential wives for the Prophet, right?
That's right.
I mean, it's fascinating to think that someone in her position could have such an influence on the Prophet's life, and then by extension, on how the Muslim community developed.
It really shows you how even actions that seem small at the time can have these huge consequences down the line. But to really understand why her suggestions were so significant, we need to look at the context of each marriage.
Okay, let's start with Sauda. What led Khawla to suggest her?
Well, Khawla saw in Sauda a woman who'd experienced loss. She'd been widowed recently. And Khawla also recognized her cheerful disposition and her ability to bring joy to a household that was probably grieving the loss of Khadijah. On top of that, Sauda was considered by many as unmarriageable because of her age and social standing, which makes the Prophet's acceptance of the proposal even more meaningful.
Right, it speaks to his compassion
Yeah.
and his willingness to challenge social norms. What about Aisha? She was quite young at the time, wasn't she?
She was. But Khawla saw in her someone who could be a suitable match for him in the future. And actually, when she suggested Aisha to the Prophet, she phrased it in a very clever way. She said, "The daughter of the most beloved person to you,"
Wow.
which, of course, immediately pointed to Abu Bakr.
That's a very subtle way to do
It
it.
is. It's very astute.
Hmm. But I'm sure there were concerns, especially about Aisha's age and her previous engagement.
Oh, absolutely. Abu Bakr initially hesitated. He was concerned about the social implications and the fact that Aisha was already promised to someone else. But the Prophet clarified that their bond of brotherhood didn't actually prevent marriage according to Islamic law. And as for Aisha's previous engagement, it was ultimately broken off because her fiancé wouldn't convert to Islam.
Okay. So Khawla's matchmaking played this really key role in bringing about these marriages, which would end up having a huge impact on the Prophet's life and how the Muslim community developed. But her contributions didn't stop there.
Right.
She continued to be a respected member of the community even after her husband died.
Yeah, and speaking of Uthman's passing, it's worth noting that he didn't live that long after the Hijra. He actually died from an illness, probably a fever, not long after they settled in Medina.
I imagine his death was a blow to the community,
It was.
especially to the Prophet, who was so close to him.
Absolutely. And the accounts describe the Prophet's, profound grief. He personally took part in Uthman's burial, and he even said that he wished to be buried near him.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. And there's even this detail about the Prophet placing a stone on Uthman's grave to mark it. And that act, born out of love and respect, it actually set a precedent for Muslims who still mark graves in a similar way today.
These details give us a glimpse into the Prophet's human side, his capacity for deep emotion, and genuine affection for his companions.
Yeah. And Uthman's story, even though it's not as well known as some others, it really underscores that vital role played by those who might not have held, official leadership positions,
Yeah.
but whose piety and just unwavering faith really contributed to the growth and strength of that early Muslim community.
Right. A reminder that history isn't just about these big figures and major events. It's about the everyday lives of individuals,
Yeah.
their choices,
Yeah.
their relationships,
Right.
their struggles, and their triumphs. It's by going deeper into these individual stories that we can really grasp the human experience and the lasting power of the human spirit.
Absolutely. But Uthman's story is also very much connected to his wife Khawla's story.
Hmm.
Her life, especially after he passed away, is fascinating in its own right and tells us a lot about the resilience of women in early Islam.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear more about that. It's amazing how she didn't just retreat or give up after such a loss. She turned her grief into something positive,
Yeah.
becoming this respected teacher and mentor in the community.
It really speaks to her character and her deep commitment to Islam. And it's a powerful reminder of the crucial part women played in passing down knowledge and shaping future generations of Muslims.
Yeah. And it's not like she was just teaching anyone. Umar ibn Abdulaziz, the future caliph, known for his justice and piety, he was one of her students.
Exactly. He held her in such high esteem. He called her the righteous woman, acknowledging her wisdom and how much she shaped his development as a leader.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible to think about how her influence, which started with those matchmaking efforts, rippled outwards and shaped the future of the Muslim community in ways she might not have even imagined.
Yeah. It shows how leadership can come in so many forms. Doesn't always mean having a formal title or being in the spotlight. Sometimes the most significant influence comes from those who quietly focus on nurturing and educating others.
It also shines a light on a really interesting side of early Islamic society.
Right.
The respect given to knowledgeable women and how actively they were involved in passing on that knowledge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Khawla's story challenges us to look past the usual stories and see how much women contributed to shaping the intellectual and spiritual landscape of early Islam. But there's another intriguing detail to her story, one that links her directly to the Quran.
Are you talking about how some people think a verse in the Quran might be about Khawla?
Exactly. Some scholars believe that verse 10 of Surah Al-Mumtahana, the one talking about a believing woman offering herself in marriage to the Prophet, is actually referring to Khawla.
Right. It said that she offered herself to the Prophet after Uthman died, though he declined.
Right.
I mean, if that interpretation is right, it really speaks to her piety and her close relationship with the Prophet.
Yeah. It adds another dimension to her story, showing her as this woman of deep faith, unwavering loyalty, and incredible strength. She navigated the complexities of early Muslim society with so much grace and determination. and left behind a legacy that continues to inspire.
It's been an incredible journey uncovering the lives of Uthman ibn Mathoon and Khawla bint Hakeem.
It has.
They might not be household names,
Right.
but their story gives us a window into the challenges, the sacrifices, and the profound faith of the early Muslim community.
Yeah. And it reminds us that history is not just about dates and battles, but about the lives of individuals, their choices, their relationships, their struggles, and their victories. By digging into these personal stories, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the human experience and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
And what a powerful story they have. Uthman, the dedicated believer, seeking a deeper connection with his faith, and Khawla, the resilient woman who transformed her grief into acts of service and left a lasting mark on the community. Their lives, so closely intertwined, offer us so much to learn about faith, resilience, and the significance of community.
Yeah, their story also highlights the importance of digging for those hidden gems in history, the stories of people who are often overlooked, but whose contributions were crucial in shaping the course of events.
Exactly. And we hope that this deep dive has encouraged you to do just that, to look beyond the familiar and discover the richness and complexity of history. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to exploring more fascinating stories with you in the future.
You're right, his piety was really something else. There's actually a story that illustrates this beautifully. Uthman became so devoted to his religious practices that he actually considered giving up everything else and just focusing on worship, almost like a monk, fasting all the time and praying through the night. He even thought about abstaining from marital relations altogether.
Wow, that's some serious dedication.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that might cause a bit of tension in a marriage.
Yeah, definitely. And understandably so, his wife Khawla was pretty worried about this sudden change, so she turned to Aisha for advice. And Aisha, being the trusted friend that she was, she went to the Prophet and explained the situation.
And I'm sure the Prophet, with his wisdom and understanding of human nature, had some insightful guidance to offer.
Oh, absolutely. He gently reminded Uthman that he, the Prophet, was the best example to follow. He emphasized that he himself kept a balance. He fasted, he prayed, but he also enjoyed the company of his wives. It's a beautiful reminder, isn't it, that Islam isn't about going to extremes, but about finding that harmony between our spiritual and worldly lives.
Yeah, it's about embracing all of life, recognizing that our relationships and our responsibilities are just as much a part of our worship as our individual acts of devotion.
Exactly. And Uthman took the Prophet's words to heart. He went back to a more balanced way of life, one that honored both his faith and his marriage. But this intense devotion of his, it also led him to this pretty remarkable experience.
Are you talking about the time when Uthman witnessed a revelation firsthand?
Yeah. Imagine being present when those divine words were revealed to the Prophet. They say that Uthman was actually sitting with the Prophet when the verses of Surah An-Nisa, verse 135, came down.
Those are some powerful verses, urging us to uphold justice and be kind, especially to family, and condemning all kinds of wrongdoing and injustice.
And Uthman's reaction to witnessing this revelation is really moving. He said that he felt overwhelmed with faith, like his heart was overflowing with love for the Prophet. It's like the experience just deepened his connection to both the message and the messenger.
Makes you think about how those early revelations, how transformative they were,
Right.
not just for the Prophet, but also for those who were there to see it happen.
Yeah,
Even someone like Uthman, who was already so devout.
absolutely. It speaks to the ever-evolving nature of faith, how it can grow and deepen through these incredible experiences and encounters with the divine. But sadly, as we know, Uthman's time in Medina was cut short.
Yeah, his death must have been a huge loss for that young community.
It was. He was the first of the Muhajirun, those who migrated from Mecca to die in Medina. And the accounts really emphasize how deeply the Prophet grieved. He personally participated in Uthman's burial, and he even said that he wanted to be buried close to him.
It really shows the strength of their bond.
It does. And then there's also this touching detail about the Prophet placing a stone on Uthman's grave to mark it. And this simple act, done out of love and respect, well, it actually became a tradition for Muslims.
It's amazing how these small gestures can have such a lasting impact.
Yeah. These details really show us the Prophet's humanity,
Right.
his capacity for such deep emotion, and his genuine affection for those around him. And Uthman's story, even though it's not as famous, really highlights the crucial role played by all those individuals, who might not have been in positions of leadership, but whose piety and steadfast faith really helped that early Muslim community grow and thrive.
Right. It's a good reminder that history is not just about the big names and the dramatic events. It's about the everyday people, the choices they made, the relationships they had, their struggles, their triumphs. And by looking at those individual stories, we can really gain a deeper appreciation for the human experience.
Absolutely. But Uthman's story is also inseparable from his wife Khawla's story. And her life, particularly after his passing, is equally compelling.
Okay.
And it tells us a lot about the strength of women in early Islam.
I'm really eager to explore that further.
Mm-hmm.
It's remarkable how she didn't just withdraw or succumb to despair after losing her husband. She turned her grief into something positive, becoming this respected teacher and mentor in the community.
It really speaks volumes about her character and her deep devotion to Islam. It's a powerful reminder of the vital role that women played in transmitting knowledge and nurturing future generations of Muslims.
Yeah, and she wasn't just teaching anyone. Umar ibn Abu Aziz, the future caliph, known for his justice and piety, he was one of her students.
Wow.
Exactly. He held her in such high regard that he actually called her the righteous woman, acknowledging her wisdom and the profound impact she had on his development as a leader.
It's incredible to think about how her influence started with those matchmaking efforts and then rippled outwards, shaping the future of the Muslim community in ways she probably never could have imagined. It really highlights how leadership can take so many forms. It's not always about having a formal position or being in the spotlight. Sometimes the most profound influence comes from those who just quietly dedicate themselves to nurturing and educating others.
Her story also sheds light on a really fascinating aspect of early Islamic society, the respect that was given to women who possessed knowledge and the active role that they played in passing on that knowledge.
You're right. Kalala's story really challenges us to look beyond those dominant narratives and recognize how much women contributed to the intellectual and spiritual landscape of early Islam. But there's another really intriguing part of her story, one that connects her directly to the Quran.
Are you talking about the suggestion that a verse in the Quran might actually be about Khawla?
Exactly. Some scholars believe that verse 10 of Surah Al-Mumtahana, the one that talks about a believing woman offering herself in marriage to the Prophet, refers to Khawla.
Right. It said that she offered herself to the Prophet after Uthman passed away, although he declined. If that interpretation is correct, it's a remarkable testament to her piety and her close relationship with the Prophet.
It adds another layer to her story, doesn't it? Portraying her as a woman of deep faith, unwavering loyalty, and remarkable strength. She navigated the complexities of early Muslim society with grace and determination, and left a legacy that I think continues to inspire.
It's been amazing to uncover the lives of Uthman ibn Mathoon and Khawla bint Hakeem. They may not be household names,
True.
but their story gives us this window into the challenges, the sacrifices, and the deep faith that really defined that early Muslim community.
It also reminds us that history is not just about dates and battles, but about the lives of individuals, their choices, their relationships, their struggles, and their triumphs. And I think by really delving into these personal stories, we can gain a much deeper appreciation for the human experience and the enduring power of the human spirit.
And what a powerful story they have. Uthman, the devoted believer, constantly striving for a deeper connection with his faith. And Khawla, the resilient woman who transformed her grief into acts of service and left an indelible mark on the community. Their lives so intertwined offer us so much to reflect on faith resilience, the importance of community.
And their story reminds us how important it is to look for those often overlooked figures in history, those whose contributions may have been subtle, but were absolutely crucial in shaping the course of events.
Absolutely. And we hope that this deep dive has encouraged you to do just that, to look beyond the familiar narratives and uncover the richness and complexity of history. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to exploring more fascinating stories with you in the future.